Welcome to National Affairs. I'm Tasha Carradine.
And I'm Rudyard Griffiths. Well, Tasha, the fine diplomatic dance continues between Netanyahu and Barack Obama all over whether Israel should or should not strike Iran. Let's have a listen to the president, the latest kind of articulation of where American policy is at on this important issue.
So there should not be a shred of doubt by now. When the chips are down, I have Israel's back. A nuclear-armed Iran is completely counter to Israel's security interests. But it is also counter to the national security interests of the United States.
It's also counter to his re-election interests. Let's be brutally frank about this. Obama has to walk a tightrope here because in the last election he was accused by many in the pro-Israel community of not being a strong enough supporter of Israel. He had to really earn his stripes there. And then when he came in, there was that whole issue with the Palestinians, and people said that he was perhaps being a little too friendly there, and now he's pulled back. And, you know, he's been all over the map on this. I don't envy him, though, because in an election year, this is really a bomb potentially going off for him.
Is it, though, Tash? I'll be real quick here. Latest polls suggest only 1 in 5 Americans thinks that the U.S. should support Israel in an attack on Iran. So what does this president really have to lose with going slow?
Well, he has to lose potentially the support of the American-Israel community, and that's what the story is here, really, is how does he walk that line? And to tell us more about that, we're now pleased to be joined by Clifford May. He is the president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, and he is also in Washington, part of the discussions of the America-Israel Public Affairs Committee. Welcome to National Affairs. Clifford, give us a sense of this tightrope that President Obama is walking. You know, how important is the support of the America-Israel community for him in this re-election year?
Well, it's important, but if he thinks that's the most important part of this equation, and I hope he doesn't, he's very much misguided. Look, what we're talking about here is the regime that rules Iran. It is the leading sponsor of terrorism in the world. It is oil-rich, despite the sanctions. It wants to develop nuclear weapons. It has indeed promised to wipe Israel off the map. But it's also promised that a world without America is attainable. This is the major national security threat to Israel, but also to the United States and also to the West. And if America does not lead on this, if the belief becomes that this is Israel's problem, not America's problem, not Canada's problem, not Europe's problem, that will be very misguided. It will be like saying, as Neville Chamberlain did in 1938, we have a problem with Germany, the problem is Czechoslovakia. If we just give the Germans Czechoslovakia, we won't have a German problem. Very myopic then, it would be very myopic now.
Clifford, you're on the ground there in Washington. Any sense of a change in the red lines? Very different red lines on Iran between, obviously, the administration, which says that it's really about Iran developing the capacity to have a nuclear weapon, whereas Israel says they can't even be allowed to have that. Have those red lines shifted at all over the last 72 hours of shuttle diplomacy?
They have not shifted in the speech that we heard from President Obama. Whether in the meeting between President Obama and Prime Minister Netanyahu they shifted, I can't tell you for sure. But you're basically right. What President Obama has been saying, and the American red line, is that the Iranians can't have a nuclear weapon. The Israelis are saying, they can't even have the capability to build a nuclear weapon. We need to be 1 or 2 steps back from that. And that is an important distinction, although there is also the question, is Obama really prepared to do whatever is necessary to prevent Iran from not just having a capability, or if not that, from having nuclear weapons and the means to deliver them? His speech was strong. He said, we're not going to contain Iran. We've said over and over that we have Israel's back. That's not enough, as I say, that we do not want Iran to have a nuclear weapon. But how far will the president go in order to stop Iran from having that? If Iran does get nuclear weapons, it will be a hinge moment in the history of the 21st century. At that point, Iran has a nuclear umbrella for all the terrorist organizations it supports. Those include Hezbollah, Hamas, and yes, Al-Qaeda. And it's and you also have the real possibility of what they call.
I just want to stop you for a second because you said you raised a lot of good points. From what you're saying, I take it that Iran-Israel issue is America's issue as well. So in a sense, if the goal is to stop Iran from building a nuclear weapon, is Israel essentially doing America's dirty work? Because that weapon could be aimed at America next.
You're absolutely right. If Israel does this, it is doing work for America, for Europe, I think for the entire free world, and it would at least like to have some support from the free world and from the United States in particular if it has to go and do this on its own. And I think one of the things you heard from Obama that he did seem to recognize is if Iran gets nuclear weapons, it will not be the last regime in the Middle East to get nuclear weapons. Expect Turkey, expect Saudi Arabia, expect Egypt, maybe the Emiratis also to get nuclear weapons. You will have nuclear weapons all over the place. The chance of them getting into terrorist hands and being used somewhere, we don't know where, sometime over the next 20 or 30 years will become very, very great.
And let's also not forget that Israel may have upwards of 60 atomic bombs of its own. But I don't want to go there with you on that issue right now. I want to instead have you explain to us the power of the Israel lobby. For the uninitiated up in Canada, it's slightly amazing how much attention they're able to demand and the degree to which this president has had to focus on them. Why is that? Why do they command such power, such influence?
Well, I mean, there's any number of reasons. For one thing, just so you understand, there are 13 or 14,000 people at this AIPAC conference. Not all of them are actually Jewish. There are quite a few people in the United States, evangelical Christians perhaps prominent among them, who believe that America is a global leader, should remain a global leader, and that means America protects its allies. And Israel is America's most reliable ally, and it's an ally that is on the front lines if you do believe that we are fighting a war against radical Islamic movements, organizations, and regimes. Why? Because of where Israel is geographically. And the belief is among a lot of Americans, if you look at the polls, it's not just Jewish Americans, that if America is not going to protect its most reliable ally, then it's not going to be a global leader. And the question then becomes, if America is going to relinquish global leadership, to whom can it pass the torch? You know, after World War II, Britain passed the torch to America, but to whom can America pass the torch now? I think it's a question that needs some debate.
Okay, we only have about a minute left. I'd like to get a sense of America's role if, God forbid, a strike Israel wanted to make on Iran became a reality. Would Israel consult, would Tel Aviv consult with Washington, or would they simply make the decision on their own? How would America figure into that process?
A little tricky to say. I think if what you heard Obama saying on Sunday was that Israel has the sovereign right to defend itself any way it chooses. The United States might prefer not to be consulted too much in advance, maybe a little bit of forewarning, but the United States may want to say this was Israel's decision. It was not our decision. We had no part in it. We don't take responsibility for it. It is also possible that Obama will be saying to Netanyahu privately, I don't want you to go ahead and do this. I don't want this to happen this year. I've given you my assurance. I'm asking you not to, and certainly if you do it, I want you to give us plenty of warning. So we don't know for sure. I do think that that Netanyahu will say, look, at the end of the day, we're responsible for our own security. Israel was established so that the Jewish people would not have to rely on others for their continued existence. At the end of the day, he'll make the decisions he makes, and my guess is that America won't be shocked, won't be surprised, but may not have a lot of forewarning.
All right. Clifford May, President of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies from Washington, thanks very much for joining us on National Affairs today.